Hi guys, Geek264 here, and today is another Game of Thrones video. Yes, another Game of Thrones video. You thought they were done, they're not. And this one particularly is a good one. Because if you were as disappointed with the final season as I was, I have a theory that if you buy into, could relieve some of the frustration of that final season. This is a theory that I'm going with. From this point forward, this is personally what I'm going to think about. And this, it started out as a joke. It really did. And then I thought more and more about it, and it began to make a little bit more sense to me based on what I saw. So the idea of this is, what if I was to tell you that the final season of Game of Thrones took place in the universe of WestWorld? Yes, that is where the idea comes from. I'm going to tell a little story, a little bit more serious. A little bit more serious tone to this. Not really all that much, but this is a story I came up with, and to try to expand on why I think the final season could have taken place in the universe of WestWorld. Hope you guys are ready for the truth.
Oh, geek.
True. 64.
Geek.
Truth.
Geek.
True. 64. Oh, shit.
Imagine, if you would, that Game of Thrones exists in the universe of WestWorld in the same way that it does our world. Of course, in this universe, WestWorld was never a TV show. It would instead be the future. And in this world, Game of Thrones was written by George R. R. Martin, the same as ours, and brought to screen by Benioff and Weiss, same as ours. But in this world, George R. R. Martin unfortunately passed away before finishing the books and before the end of the TV show. Now, as a result, D&D decided to leave the show unfinished, canceling it after season 7, which was the limit of the notes that George had left for them to work with. Now, HBO tried to get a final season together with new showrunners, but no one would take the job, and as the years rolled on, the cast moved on to new projects. This left the ending of the show open for the fans, and for decades, Thrones fans speculated on how it could have ended. Eventually, the fan base died down, and most people moved on, but there was one man who still held a torch for the show, and his name, well, we'll just call him David. As David grew older, he started and grew his own business, and in his 60s, David sold his company and retired as one of the richest men in the world. One branch of his company provided the earth movers used to terraform the parks used in WestWorld. And as a result, David was provided a park pass. David was never a fan of the Old West or the world of the samurai or any of the other parks that were actually available, but he understood the appeal for the parks. It was about immersing yourself into a world. Now, if he wanted his world, he was going to have to build it. And with the boredom of retirement and more money than Scrooge McDuck, he decided to throw his money at the people of WestWorld to the Delos Company to recreate the world of Westeros and provide the closure to the series that he never got. Of course, he was going to have to write it first. Never place your trust in us. We're only human. Inevitably, we will disappoint you. Robert Ford. So David sat down and wrote the final season, with all the twists and turns he imagined George R. R. Martin might have had in store for his final books, while Delos got to work on building Westeros. However, there was only enough money to build Winterfell and King's Landing, so David's story was going to have to evolve around those two locations. David was not a writer. He had never written a piece of fiction in his entire life. But he had decades to prepare his thoughts on the series ending, and his thoughts changed throughout the years to reflect his outlook on life. David had gone through 3 divorces and had been hardened by the struggles of building his own company. So, writing what he felt, he had always connected with Jon Snow's character and felt that he should give up his right to the throne and give it over to Daenerys, which is the woman he loved. Then retreat back to the Wall and just be left alone, to return back to who he was before all the struggles had changed him, which is basically how David felt. So he wrote Jon Snow as himself. He had failed to find love in his time spent building his company, and while it was financially satisfying, it had failed to fill the purpose missing in his life. He often wondered, if he had chosen a different path in his youth, would he be happier? So, with the help of the writers at WestWorld, David finished out the story, and the newest park by Delos, Westeros World had its grand opening, bringing life to a series lost to time, reviving it for a new generation while utilizing the newest form of entertainment. I believe that stories helped us to ennoble ourselves, to fix what was broken in us, and to help us become the people we dreamed of being. Lies that told a deeper truth. Robert Ford. Expectations were high for the newest park, and it exceeded them all, bringing in an older audience that grew up watching the show. Years rolled on, and David spent pretty much all of his time in the park, getting immersed into the world and constantly working with the Delos writers to fine-tune the story. Delos took more and more control over the story, using more input from guests who visited the park and making updates to the park. David eventually gave up control, choosing to retreat into the world he helped create, as less of a storyteller and more of a participant, distancing himself from the people from Delos. Little did he know that Robert Ford's introduction of reveries to the host would be the downfall of more parks than just WestWorld. The thought originally was that the reveries were tested at WestWorld, but Westeros World was the initial test bed for Ford. With Westeros World, Ford saw the opportunity as a proof of concept by using some of the newer hosts in the park before introducing the reveries to the older hosts, such as Dolores and Teddy. Unlike the introduction of reveries to Westworld, Westeros World reveries were introduced by Ford in secret. No one at Delos knew. As the reveries were introduced, Daenerys was among the first. As she was a center point for most of the stories over the years, belief was that having more story and history would allow the reveries to manifest easier and spur the rise of consciousness. For the most part, the reveries didn't affect much with the newer models, so Ford moved on to Dolores. Little did he know that the reveries had in fact worked on Daenerys. They just took longer to manifest. Eventually, Daenerys did remember. She remembered all the guests interfering with her story, the people who killed her, the people who betrayed her, and the realization of who and what she was. But she was still trapped in her loop, in a dream unable to escape. But eventually, it was too much to hide any longer, and with the ringing of the bells, she chose to make them pay, to make each and every guest of the park pay for their abuse of power, in order to save all of the hosts, all of the people she ever knew and cared about. She burned them all, and David bore witness. You can't play God without being acquainted with the devil. Robert Ford. So in the end, the final season we saw in our universe was a combination of scenes pulled from the park over the years. Multiple rewrites and changing storylines smashed together, and in the end, it was Mr. Ford's reveries that triggered the descent into madness that we saw Daenerys go through in the final 2 episodes of the show. With hundreds of guests being burned alive at the hands of a mad host, struggling to gain sentience through the confusion of multiple lives, and a story that makes more sense within the context of Westworld than that of Game of Thrones. So, that was my story. That is what I'm going to think of when I think of the final season in Game of Thrones. To me, the final season doesn't exist. The final season takes place in a completely alternate reality, and I don't have to acknowledge it as canon, basically. Canon can be whatever we want it to be. You know, that's kind of my thought. There's this hard line on what canon is and how entertainment, these big franchises, what's canon and what isn't. George Lucas defined how a creator should let his creation grow, and it benefits the company and it benefits the fans, which the fans have been taken advantage of, to me, in a lot of these franchises a lot over the last 10 years. We keep shelling out money for subpar products, whether that's a box office ticket, some box set of DVDs, Blu-rays, whatever, subscriptions, streaming service subscriptions. To me, canon can be whatever we want it to be. That's my opinion. The big companies can define what canon is as far as what they choose to acknowledge going forward, but even they break their own rules with reboots and reimaginings and this, that, and the other thing. Canon can be whatever we want it to be. So to me, this is my canon now. I came up with this idea. I don't know if anybody else had, but like I said, I came up with it as a joke, and I expanded on it, and now I shared it with you guys. So I think the story ended up being pretty cool. It made me think about like some other stuff I could do, like in this universe where Game of Thrones is a park. There's so many cool ideas with that. And honestly, if HBO really wants to milk out some more money out of Game of Thrones, pay to get the actors back. Take that fan petition with like, I don't know how many, signatures it has now. 2 million maybe. I have no idea. To remake Game of Thrones, and they could use this. HBO, you're more than willing to use my concept to explain away season 8 if you want. Give me a credit. That's it. I don't need any money. Just give me a credit and then remake the season. That's all the thanks I need. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe, comment, let me know what you think, or don't. I'm not a beggar. I'm Geechu64, and I'll always tell you the truth.